The sky above the Blackwater Bay was a hard, pitiless gray when the direwolves appeared along the southern ridge. In the dead hour before dawn, while the torches guttered low in the outer streets and the bells of Baylor's sept slept silent, a cold wind slipped through the battlements of King's Landing. Only the crows and a few half-sober gold cloaks saw the northern banners rise in the mist, a shock of gray and white above the trembling river. The banners did not flutter in pride. They advanced, silently, under the stern gaze of the boy they now called king. Robb Stark's youth had been hammered into iron. He rode at the vanguard, his jaw set, the cold air burning in his lungs, his every sense tuned to the city below, a city not yet his, but trembling on the edge of it. Beside him, his mother's voice echoed in memory. "Mercy, Robb. Remember mercy when you have the power." But mercy was a luxury seldom granted in the North, and never in war. The fords at the Blackwater Rush had been taken in the night. The red dawn found Lannister banners in tatters, gold and crimson floating like autumn leaves on the current. Edmure Tully, riding hard and ragged after his forced march from the Riverlands, had held the southern approach, while the great Jon Umber and his giants had come screaming down on the eastern flank, their voices echoing off the stone. A hammer and anvil, Robb's uncle called it, though the anvil had teeth. Robb sat his horse a moment, gazing down at the city whose walls gleamed gold in the new light. The city sprawled beyond the walls, like a beached leviathan, huge and defenseless, its gatehouses pocked with old wounds from Stannis' siege and the wildfire that still haunted the minds of men. On the highest hill, the Red Keep sat proud. But Tywin Lannister and the main strength of the Lions were gone, marching in the west to break the Blackfish at River Run. Joffrey was king, in name if not in will. Cersei his shadow. Littlefinger, Varys, Pycelle, all the players in the capital's games, but their pieces were scattered, their eyes set westward, blind to the knife behind them. Robb drew his sword, ice reborn, a great bastard blade forged from the heart of House Stark. The steel was dark, almost black, quenched in the cold rivers of the north, the pommel gripped with direwolf's head silvered and grim. The sword caught the dawn and split it. The sound of it, singing free from the scabbard, made Grey Wind lift his head and growl, the hackles on his monstrous back bristling. The wolf was battle-hardened now too, his fur darkened with dust and dried blood, his yellow eyes keen with the taste of conquest. "We ride," Robb said, and the word ran down the line, a stone thrown in still water. The spears lowered. The Riverlords murmured prayers. The Northmen grinned, savage and eager. Robb nudged his horse, and the armies of the wolf and trout and direwolf surged down the hill, a living tide against the walls of King's Landing. No one expected them. The Lannister men left in the city were too few, mostly second sons and half-trained hirelings, made lazy by victory and the certainty of their own invulnerability. They died with surprise in their eyes, at the gate of the gods, in the crooked streets of Fleabottom, on the steps of the Sept. The gold cloaks held for a while, but their captain was bought by Petyr Baelish, and Littlefinger's purse ran out when the swords pressed at his own throat. He vanished into the cellars, seeking rats and safety. Robb led from the front, gray cloak swirling, Grey Wind at his stirrup, his bannermen fanned wide to smother any spark of resistance before it could catch fire. He had planned for blood, but found more surrender than slaughter. The small folk hated the Lannisters, hated the war, hated the taxes, hated the sound of Joffrey's laugh in the castle. When the gates opened and the wolves poured through, the butcher's boys and dockside women threw their caps in the air and wept, some crying king in the north, and others simply weeping, as if the horror of the last year was a fever breaking at last. Catelyn Stark rode into the city by the king's gate, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes red with worry and hope. She found her son on the steps of the great Septi, bloodied but unbowed, a patchwork of dust and sweat clinging to his mail. "You must be careful now," she whispered. "The city is a serpent's nest, Robb. Its fangs are hidden." He nodded, but his eyes were on the Red Keep. They had taken the city, but not yet the throne. Within the Red Keep, chaos ruled. Joffrey Baratheon, king of the Seven Kingdoms by the grace of his mother's ambition and his grandfather's swords, stood in his solar, shrieking at the courtiers. "It's a trick, it's a trick, they'll never take me. I am the king, I, mother. Cersei Lannister, ever the lioness, stalked the high halls with wildfire in her eyes, and a dagger hidden in her gown. She ordered Sir Meryn Trant to seal the royal apartments. Pycelle stammered and shuffled. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, watched it all in silence, his massive hands flexing on the hilt of his sword. No love for the Lannisters left in him, if ever there had been any. It was Varys who came first to kneel, gliding in like a ghost, his perfumed hands spread in a gesture of peace. "Your Grace," he purred to Robb Stark. "It is my pleasure to serve." Robb looked at him as if he were some strange animal. "I did not come for pleasure," he said. "Only for peace and justice. Peace and justice are delicate flowers, Your Grace. They wilt easily." The spider's eyes flickered. "But if you would rule this city, you will need the roots as well as the petals." That was the beginning of the bargain, the first of many, and Robb saw then the difference between winning battles and ruling kingdoms. In the north, a man's word was his bond. In King's Landing, words were weapons, and truth was a blade with two edges. It was midday when the gates of the Red Keep swung open. Robb entered with his mother at his side, gray wind preceding them. The direwolf's head held high, the north comes south at last. The halls were thick with the scent of fear, stale wine, sweat, the musk of too many bodies kept too long behind stone. Robb's men took the Tower of the Hand. They found Sansa Stark in the maiden vault, pale and silent as a wraith, her blue eyes too old for her years. "Robb," she whispered, her voice a thread. She fell into his arms, shaking, and Catelyn wept behind them, relief and grief tangled as one. Tommen Baratheon, the little king who never wanted a crown, was found playing with kittens in a solar, unguarded but for a nervous septa. Myrcella was gone. Shipped away to Dorne months before. Safe beyond Robb's reach. Of the royal household, only Joffrey, Cersei, and their closest retainers remained, huddled in Maegor's holdfast, the last redoubt. The siege was brief. The men left to Cersei knew the city was lost. Many surrendered. But not all. Sir Meryn Trant and a dozen goldcloaks tried to rally to Joffrey's side. Swords drawn, voices trembling with more fear than faith. They lasted until gray wind crashed through the doors in a blur of teeth and fury. The Hound followed, his face like death, scattering the last of the resistance with a wordless growl. Joffrey was dragged from his bed, kicking and screaming, and thrown in chains. Cersei clung to him, her eyes wild. "Do you know what you're doing, wolf boy? The Lannisters will answer this with fire and death. My father is dead," Robb said softly. "And so are the men who killed him. Your father fights in the west, and may never see this city again." "Bain," she spat at his feet. "You'll never be king." "Perhaps not," Robb said. "But you will never be queen again." It was done. The city was his. But victory brings its own poison. The small folk flooded the streets, chanting the name Stark. But behind their smiles lurked the old city's hunger. Grain was scarce. Tywin Lannister had stripped the granaries to feed his armies. The Goldcloaks, those not slain or fled, prowled the alleys, seeking new masters. Littlefinger slithered into the cracks, offering coin and advice. Varys sent his little birds to every corner. The High Septon demanded audience, reminding all that the gods too watched the game. Robb named Edmure Tully Hand of the King. "For the Riverlands," he said, "and the honor of House Stark." But his uncle, always more at home with a fishing rod than a crown, looked uneasy in the seat. The great John Umber was made master of laws, his booming voice filling the council chambers, while Catelyn took charge of the queen's apartments and the safety of her daughter. It was not enough. Messages flew across the kingdoms like winter crows. Stannis Baratheon, licking his wounds on Dragonstone, sent cold congratulations and a demand for fealty. Renly Baratheon, still in the south, wrote with honeyed words, proposing alliance and marriage, should Robb's sister wish it. In the Eyrie, Lysa Arryn preened, promising support, but sending nothing. In Dorne, Prince Doran watched and waited, eyes narrowed. And in the west, Tywin Lannister marched, red rage burning in every step. He learned of the city's fall at Oxcross, where the small folk spat at his banner, and the men muttered behind their hands. Jaime Lannister, still a captive in Riverrun's dungeons, sent no word. Casterly Rock trembled with the threat of siege. Days became weeks, and the city strained under its new masters. Robb walked the walls nightly, Grey Wind his only companion, his thoughts circling like hawks. He found Sansa in the Godswood, kneeling before the old heart tree, the pale face carved in weeping. "I prayed for you," she said, her voice as soft as the wind. "I prayed you would come, and you did." He knelt beside her, his hand on hers. "We're together now, Sansa. I'll not let anyone hurt you again." "But the city is not ours," she whispered. "Not really. They hate us still, some of them. They fear the North. They whisper of dragons, and old kings, and darker things in the shadows." "And now," he stroked her hair, wishing he had answers. The Iron Throne loomed in the throne room, its blaze thirsty for blood. Robb had never wanted it, not truly. But here it was. His, for now. At council, the arguments were endless. The Riverlords wanted revenge against the Lannisters. The Northmen wanted to return home, to the snow and pine and safety. Edmure begged for mercy to the small folk. The Great John demanded more executions. Catelyn's voice, quiet but unyielding, was the only balance. "We must rule as we would in the North," she told her son. "With justice, not fear. The city will never love us, but if we feed them, shelter them, keep them safe, they will obey." Robb listened. Grain was bought at triple price from the Reach. Wells were dug. The Night's Watch sent word. Jon Snow, his bastard brother, wrote of unrest at the Wall, of wildlings stirring, of darker omens in the far north. And in the dungeons, Joffrey Baratheon howled, swearing vengeance. Cersei plotted, even behind her locked doors, whispering to the servants, sowing discord where she could. Varys came, night after night, offering secrets. "Tywin will come," he warned, his voice a serpent's hiss. "And when he does, the city will be a tomb if you are not ready. The gates must be manned. The people must believe you are their king." Robb nodded, but inside, he wondered. He was a wolf, born to run the forests, not a fox, slinking through the warrens of men. On the 8th night, news came. Tywin Lannister was a week's march from the city, his army swollen with sellswords and free riders. The Riverlords quailed. Edmure looked pale. The Great John wanted to ride out and meet them, but Robb shook his head. "We hold the city," he said, "and we prepare. The city is strong, its walls high. We will outlast them, as they once did to Stannis." His mother agreed, but her eyes betrayed her fear. "You are not Ned, Robb. The city will test you. Trust no one." The preparations began. Gates were shored. Arrows fletched. Boiling oil was readied, and the harbor sealed with iron chains. Robb met with the city's smiths, promising gold for every blade and armor they could forge. The Northmen patrolled in pairs, wary of southern knives in the dark. Littlefinger appeared in the council one morning, his smile sly. "Gold wins wars, my king. I can fill the city's coffers, at a price." "And what price is that?" Robb asked, his voice cold. Littlefinger spread his hands. "Only a seat at your table, and a promise that the North will not forget its friends when the lions return." Robb's eyes narrowed. "Friends do not sell their loyalty for coin, Lord Baelish. If you wish to serve, serve. If not, the gates are open. Leave, and be quick about it." Littlefinger bowed low, his eyes never leaving Robb's. "As you wish, your grace." By the time Tywin Lannister appeared before the city, the banners of House Stark and Tully flew high on every tower. The city was locked tight, its people sullen but fed, its soldiers grim and watchful. Tywin's army circled the city like wolves at a sheepfold, but found no gaps, no weak walls, no easy victory. Robb watched from the ramparts as Tywin's men made camp on the western plain. He felt his father's shadow on his shoulder. "We hold," he told his council, "until the city's heart is truly ours. Then we will strike." But the battle for King's Landing was only just begun. In the alleys, whispers grew of southern vengeance, of fire and lions and dragons. Robb Stark, the Wolf King, had seized the throne, but the city was a living thing, and its secrets ran deeper than any river of the north. In the Red Keep, beneath the Iron Throne, the Game of Thrones twisted anew, and the boy who would be king set his jaw, knowing that every victory sows the seeds of war. The dawn burned red above the city, and the bells began to ring. A.K. The city did not sleep for days, and neither did its new king. The air in King's Landing, thick with the scent of roasting fish from the Blackwater, and the stench of too many bodies in too small a space, never truly cleared. From the slums of Flea Bottom to the domed heights of Visinia's Hill, the city lived in a tension that felt ready to snap at any moment. Robb Stark moved through it as a stranger, the cold of the north clinging to him, refusing to let him settle into the silken shadows and whispering corridors of his new realm. Gray wind prowled ahead wherever Robb walked, drawing awe and dread in equal measure. The direwolf was as much his badge of office as the crown itself, and perhaps a more effective one. The common folk came out to watch him when he passed through the market, their faces pale with the memory of the lion's cruelty, eyes wide with hope and suspicion. Some cheered, their voices half-hearted, uncertain if this wolf king would feed them or bleed them. Others just stared, hands gripping their children close. Robb felt the weight of every gaze. He felt his father's presence, stern and silent, behind him at every turn. Duty. Die to. Honor. On to. He could almost hear Ned Stark's voice. The North remembers. Do not forget who you are. But in King's Landing, remembering was difficult. Nothing stayed true for long. He saw it in the way Petyr Baelish's silver tongue could charm even the most flinty riverlord at council, or how Varys could flit from one room to the next with tidings no man should be able to gather so quickly. He saw it in Sansa, his own sister, her eyes already learning to see past what people said to what they truly meant. The subtle terror in her posture, when the door clicked shut at night. Yet he pressed on, determined not to be overwhelmed. At dawn, he rode out through the streets with Sir Brynden Tully at his side, inspecting the walls, counting stores, reviewing the discipline of the men who held the city. In the afternoons, he listened to his counsel. Edmure, exasperated but loyal. The Great John, unpredictable and fiercely protective. Sir Wendell Manderly, already suffering in the southern heat. And Catelyn, ever the voice of compassion and caution. He found himself relying on his mother more than ever, her wisdom sharp where his courage ran hot and quick. Catelyn warned him daily of the dangers within, but Robb could not turn his mind from the greater threat outside the walls. Tywin Lannister's army had finished its bloody circuit through the west, and now lay like a coiled viper, waiting to strike. The Lion's men held every road out, and their outriders harried any attempt to bring more food or arms into the city. The siege had not yet tightened, but the threat of it was constant. A shadow stretching from every alleyway, a whisper in every tavern. Still, Robb refused to cower. He summoned the city's lords and merchants to the throne room, demanding pledges of loyalty and fealty to the new order. Some knelt quickly, others had to be threatened, their lands promised to more loyal men. He handed out justice, swift and unsparing, for those who defied his rule. The first man who tried to stir a riot in Flea Bottom was hanged from the walls, his corpse a warning that the wolves were not as soft as the lions had believed. Yet he was careful, always careful. He remembered his father's lessons. Too much cruelty breeds only more rebellion. Each act of justice was tempered by mercy, where it could be afforded. The Northmen, hungry for revenge, grumbled but obeyed, kept in check by the promise of what they had won, and by the grim authority in their king's voice. It was not enough to keep peace. There were fires in the night, and once, a riot at the Gate of the Gods nearly spilled into massacre. when a crowd of refugees surged against the Goldcloaks in their desperation for bread. Robb arrived with gray wind, and the sight of the direwolf parted the mob like a knife. He promised the people food and work on the walls, and for a time, their anger cooled. But he knew that peace was bought with coin he did not have, and promises he could not keep forever. In the quiet hours after council, Robb would steal away to the Godswood, such as it was. A pale, anemic thing clinging to the northern slope of the Red Keep, no match for the wild groves of Winterfell. There, he knelt before the ancient, weeping heart tree transplanted from the north. Its face, carved with sorrow, reminded him of home and of what he had lost. Sansa would sometimes join him. Her voice was barely more than a whisper as she confessed her fears and her grief for the father she barely remembered, the mother she thought lost, the childhood stolen from her by cruelty and war. Robb listened, holding her hand in his own. He could not give her back what was lost, but he swore to her that she would be safe as long as he drew breath. But safety was a fleeting thing in the south. Even within the Red Keep, the claws of old enemies lingered. Cersei Lannister remained their most dangerous captive, all venom and pride behind her green eyes. She made every meal a contest of wills, every council meeting a minefield. She spoke little to Robb, but whispered ceaselessly to the guards, the maids, any who might still hold a drop of loyalty for the Lion. He considered sending her to the Black Cells, but Catelyn urged caution. "She's a mother," Catelyn reminded him, "and a queen. To harm her now would turn the realm against you. Let her watch her son in chains, and let that be punishment enough." Damn. Joffrey, for his part, fared even worse. His captivity gnawed at him like a rat. He screamed for his mother, for Ser Meryn, for his sword, for the heads of his captors on spikes. Robb visited him only once, to ensure the Boy King lived and could serve as a bargaining chip should Tywin force negotiations. Joffrey spat at him, and Robb left with a heavy heart, wondering if even now the gods cursed those who touched the Iron Throne. Little Tommen, innocent and soft-hearted, seemed the only Lannister with any hope of redemption. Robb assigned a gentle septa to watch him and let Sansa visit him when she wished, a kindness she repaid with quiet gratitude. As the days slipped by, news from beyond the city grew worse. Scouts reported Tywin's army growing, bolstered by reachmen eager for plunder and sellswords drawn by gold. The city's supplies began to dwindle. The price of bread doubled, then tripled. Riots flared again, quickly put down but always threatening to become something more. Robb called his council together for a war meeting, the chamber heavy with the odor of sweat and steel. "We cannot simply wait for Tywin to batter down the gates," Edmure Tully warned, voice strained. "If we do, we'll be starved out before winter's end." The Great John pounded the table. "Let me take the Northmen, lad. We'll sally out and crack the lion's skull on the plain, same as we did at Oxcross." Robb shook his head. "Tywin wants us to rush out. He's too canny. If we open the gates, he'll crush us between his hammer and the city's walls. No, we hold, but we must send for help. The Eyrie, the Reach, even Stannis if we must." "No." The name of Stannis brought a sneer to the Great John's lips, but Catelyn spoke up. "The realm is broken, Robb. No king commands every heart. We must forge alliances, not just rule by right of conquest. Send envoys to the Reach and Dorne. Remind them that the Lannisters hoard their gold, but we offer peace, trade, and a seat at the council." Robb nodded, though in his heart he doubted how much peace he could offer with an army at the gates and a city on the edge of riot. Still, he sent ravens to Highgarden and Sunspear, and dispatched trusted men, Sir Wendell to the Reach, Lord Glover to Dorne, a bold knight to the Eyrie. Each carried promises, oaths, and where it seemed wise, veiled threats. The days grew hotter, the city's mood more brittle. Gray wind snapped at shadows, and Robb slept poorly, haunted by dreams of wolves and snow, and the clatter of swords. It was not just Tywin who threatened his hold. From within, old rivals sharpened their daggers. Lord Giles Rosby, pale as bone, offered bribes for his own advancement. The High Septon hinted that the gods might withhold their blessing if the new king did not provide for the faith's coffers. Ser Boros Blount, a Lannister loyalist, was caught conspiring to open the Mudgate for Tywin's scouts and was beheaded at dawn. Each betrayal made Robb harder, less trusting, but he refused to become a tyrant. The North remembered, always. One night, as Robb stood on the ramparts with Catelyn, the bells of the Sept began to toll. Slow and mournful. A column of refugees had arrived at the city's edge, driven from the fields by Tywin's foragers. Among them were two old women from the Riverlands, bent and ragged but sharp-eyed. They begged audience with the king, and Catelyn brought them to Robb, who listened as they recited news of the West. "Tywin's dogs take all they can find," said the elder. "They burn the fields and hang those who resist. But not all the small folk bend the knee. Some remember the wolf, my lord. Some hide their sons, keep their grain secret, waiting for your banner to return." Robb thanked them and gave them bread and silver. That night, he resolved to send men north and west, small parties to rally the countryside, harry Tywin's foragers, and keep hope alive among the people. If King's Landing would be starved, so too would Tywin's host. In the Red Keep, a new kind of war began. Robb moved his war council to the old Tower of the Hand, away from the echoing marble and two curious servants of the main hall. There, maps of the surrounding country were spread over every table. Black stones marking Tywin's forces, white for the Wolf's men, red for uncommitted lords and pockets of resistance. Brynden Tully, the Blackfish, oversaw the city's defenses, cool and precise. Every movement measured, every risk weighed. Every night, Robb wrote letters, pleas for aid, promises of trade, offers of peace. He even penned one to Stannis Baratheon, a gesture of desperation more than hope. In return, Stannis' curt reply arrived by Raven. "I am the rightful king. Bend the knee and I will grant you mercy." Robb burned the letter. Weeks passed. Tywin tightened his grip, cutting off the last supply lines. Sickness began to fester among the small folk, cramped together and living on ever thinner rations. The bakers watered their flour until the bread was little more than paste. Children played at war in the alleys, their wooden swords painted with the sigils of wolves and lions. In the throne room, the Iron Throne sat heavy and silent, its blades cold and sharp in the gloom. Robb refused to sit upon it. "The throne is not mine until the realm accepts me," he told Catelyn. "Let it wait, like a sword in the scabbard." Yet the court demanded a king, so he wore his crown at council, a circlet of silver wrought in the north, with deer wolves snarling at each brow. The weight of it pressed against his skull, a constant reminder of how fragile his reign truly was. Sansa, finding her courage, began to hold audiences of her own. She listened to the pleas of noblewomen, soothed frightened children, and offered the city's orphans a place in the castle kitchens. The people loved her for it, calling her the Wolf Maiden. Robb saw the strength blooming in her, a different kind of power, quiet but enduring. One night, a fire broke out in Flea Bottom, set by a drunken band of sellswords. The flames spread quickly, threatening to consume the entire quarter. Robb himself led the effort to douse the fire, riding at the head of his guard, Grey Wind howling at his side. The sight of the king fighting alongside the small folk won him new loyalty, but cost him dearly. 4 men died, and a score were wounded. Still, the city held. Then, as the moon waned, a letter arrived from the Reach. Mace Tyrell would not support the Lannisters, but neither would he march on King's Landing, not unless his own interests were threatened. Dorne's reply was more encouraging. Prince Doran would send food and gold if Robb guaranteed trade and the safe return of Myrcella Baratheon, Cersei's daughter. Robb agreed, and the first ships from Sunspear slipped into the harbor, laden with oranges, grain, and saltfish. The people rejoiced, and the city's mood eased for a time. Tywin, seeing his siege starved of victory, grew bolder. He sent envoys demanding the release of Joffrey and Cersei, threatening to burn every field within 100 leagues if his terms were not met. Robb summoned the envoys to the throne room. He received them in full regalia, Grey Wind at his side, Sansa and Catelyn flanking him, the banners of Stark and Tully hanging from every pillar. The Great John and the Blackfish stood behind him, silent and grim. "The king in the north hears your demands," Robb said, his voice cold and clear. "But I am no usurper. I came to free this city from the tyranny of House Lannister. Tell Lord Tywin, if he wishes to see his family again, he must withdraw his army and recognize the rights of the North and Riverlands. Until then, King's Landing remains closed to him." Then so. The envoys left in silence, and Robb knew the game had grown deadlier. The next day, Tywin's men attacked the southern walls, probing for weakness. They found none, but the skirmish cost lives on both sides. That night, Catelyn warned him, "You have made your stand, Robb. There is no going back. Tywin will not forgive, and the city cannot endure another siege. You must end this war before the city breaks apart beneath you." Robb nodded, knowing she spoke true, but unsure what more he could do. He walked the ramparts that night, gray wind at his heels, watching the torches flicker in Tywin's camp, wondering how many more dawns King's Landing would see before blood ran in the streets once again. He thought of the north, of the forests and snows and the quiet strength of home, and he wondered if he would ever see it again. In the east, dragons stirred. In the west, lions roared. And above it all, the cold wind blew, carrying with it the scent of war yet to come. Rain fell in sheets that morning, sluicing the grime from King's Landing spires and alleys, turning the mud outside the gates to a sucking mire. The city, long starved for water, drank deep. Even the nobles, accustomed to shutters and awnings, felt a strange kind of relief as the dust ran down the drains, the filth scoured from cobblestones. In the Red Keep, the stones sweated, and the banners of House Stark hung sodden and heavy. The wolves of the north did not fear rain, but the city's pulse seemed slower beneath the wet sky, as if all things waited in uneasy suspension. Robb Stark rose before dawn, roused not by crows or direwolves, but by nightmares. Fires raging behind closed walls, Sansa screaming in a room he could not find, and the sound of a lion's roar echoing from the base of the throne. He dressed in silence, pulling on the black and gray, fastening the clasp of his direwolf cloak with hands that remembered snow. When he looked in the glass, he saw not a boy, nor quite a king, only a young man trying desperately to become both. He crossed the courtyard, the rain tapping a quiet tattoo on his shoulder, and found Brynden Blackfish waiting by the ramparts, eyes on the misted fields beyond the city. In the near distance, campfires of Tywin Lannister's host burned as small, sullen sparks. The Lion's army ringed King's Landing still, but the city had grown harder to strangle since the Dorne ships arrived. Grain and citrus brought hope to the hungry, and Dorne's gold bought silence in many corners that might have turned bloody. Brynden's face was gaunt, drawn sharper by sleeplessness. "Their numbers grow each night," he said as Robb joined him, voice low. "Reinforcements from the Reach, so our scouts say. Tywin is gathering more than soldiers. He's calling every vassal he ever owned, and some who swore to our side." Robb nodded, looking out across the sodden fields where tents formed a pale crescent. "Let him come," he said. "We cannot match his gold, but we have the city, and the walls hold yet. The walls won't feed us forever." Brynden's eyes lingered on the broken line where the fields met the roads. "The Dorne ships help, but the people are restless. Too many knives in the shadows." Robb's hand went unconsciously to the pommel of his sword. "Has there been more word from the Reach?" "Only more promises. Mace Tyrell grows fat on hesitation. If he comes, it will be for his own gain, not ours." Robb grunted, rain running in rivulets down his cheeks. "And the north? A few new banners. The Boltons send men, but I'd as soon see them gone again. Still, every sword counts." Brynden grunted assent and turned back to the city. "You have visitors," he said, changing the subject. "A delegation from the Faith, come to seek audience. And Sir Davos Seaworth, from Dragonstone, come under a flag of truce." "Mesawan." Robb's mouth tightened. The city was a nest of claimants, and every hour brought new schemes to his court. He left the ramparts for the hall, wiping rain from his eyes. The great corridor was already alive with the day's business. Riverlords bickering with gold cloaks, the smell of damp wool and bodies filling the air. As he entered the solar, He found Sansa waiting, pale and lovely, her hair coiled in the northern fashion, at Catelyn's insistence. The change suited her. Gone was the empty softness of her days with the Lannisters. She stood straight, her eyes watchful. A princess of the wolf pack now. "Good morning, Robb." Her voice was careful, measured. "Mother sent me. She says today will be difficult." He managed a weary smile. "Every day is difficult here." She came forward and embraced him, surprising him with the force of her affection. "You will prevail," she said in his ear. "I believe it." He squeezed her hand, grateful for the rare warmth. "I wish I shared your certainty." She only smiled, and slipped away as the doors opened for the delegation from the Faith. The High Septon was a massive man swathed in white, jewels gleaming at his throat and wrists. He prostrated himself before Robb, murmuring platitudes about the god's mercy, but Robb saw the calculation in his watery eyes. "Your Grace," he intoned. "The people of King's Landing seek guidance in these troubled times. The realm is torn by war and want. We ask your blessing and the restoration of certain privileges to the faith." Robb studied him a moment. "You will have your blessing, Septon. But the faith will not rule in place of the king. The poor will be fed, and the gods honored. But tithes must wait until the city's bellies are full." Menuend. A ripple of discomfort passed through the delegation, but the High Septon bowed his head. "The gods hear your promise, your grace. And the gods remember." The faith gone. Sir Davos Seaworth was shown in, salt and spray still clinging to his cloak. He bowed low, the candlelight glinting off the stub where his fingers had been. "Your Grace," he said, "I bring word from Lord Stannis." Robb gestured for him to rise. "Speak then." "Lord Stannis acknowledges your victory in King's Landing," Davos began. "He offers you a choice. Bend the knee, and keep the North and Riverlands as your domain, or continue the war and risk all. He asks that you release his niece, Lady Sansa, into his custody as a gesture of good faith. If you refuse, he will treat you as a usurper." Robb's jaw set. "Stannis Baratheon has his own claim, but I will not abandon mine. Tell him that the North bows to no king but its own, and Sansa remains with her family, where she belongs." Davos nodded, eyes sad but respectful. "I will bring him your words, and, your Grace, a warning. There are men in this city who would rather see chaos than peace. Beware the spider and the Littlefinger." Robb inclined his head, thoughtful. "Thank you, Sir Davos." With the envoy gone, Robb returned to council. The weight of decisions pressed on him. News from the north brought little comfort. Bolton's marching, but no word yet from White Harbor. The Karstarks sent their fealty, but more out of duty than love since Robb's execution of Lord Rickard's son. Every alliance was a thread threatening to unravel. Late in the day, Robb sat with Catelyn and Sansa in the solar, the rain still drumming outside. He let himself rest for a moment, watching his mother pour tea, his sister embroidering a direwolf on white silk. For that hour, he was a brother and a son, not a king. The peace was almost painful in its briefness. Catelyn looked up at him, concern deep in her eyes. "Robb, I must ask, what of Arya? Have we had word?" He shook his head. "Nothing. No one knows if she's alive. But I promise, Mother, if she lives, I will find her." Catelyn nodded, a tremor passing over her face. "And Bran and Rickon?" Robb's heart twisted. "The last we heard, they were safe in the north, with Sir Roderick. But Winterfell's fate is uncertain. We must hope." They sat in silence then, the only sound the rain against the glass, and the distant calls from the ramparts. By dusk, the rain eased, and the city seemed to hold its breath. In the throne room, Robb received a message. A spy caught within the inner bailey, bearing Lannister colors. The man was dragged before the king, beaten but unbowed. He stared up at Robb with bloodied eyes, lips twisted in a grin. "The lion will break your back, wolf," he spat. "Tywin comes, and he brings fire." Robb regarded him for a long moment, then ordered him sent to the cells. The show of mercy surprised many, but Robb was unflinching. "We are not lions. The North keeps its own justice. He spent that night restless, unable to sleep. The city hummed below him. Lights in the windows, laughter and fear mingling in the streets. He walked to the window of his chamber, gray wind at his heels. The direwolf pressed close, silent and watchful. In the distance, the torches of Tuin's army flickered like fallen stars. At midnight, the Blackfish came with news. There's movement in Tywin's camp. Riders, dozens, maybe more, slipping away in the dark. He may be sending men south, towards Storm's End, or west to rally more lords. Robb nodded, brow furrowed. We'll send riders to watch them. No move goes unmarked. Be careful, Robb. Tywin does nothing without purpose. The next day dawned bright and clear. The storm passed. Robb stood on the city walls, breathing in the clean, rain-washed air. He felt, for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope. The city was battered but unbroken. The people had not risen against him. Census efforts had calmed the small folk. Grain ships from Dorne and the Vale trickled in, enough to keep hunger at bay. Even the gold cloaks were coming around, their loyalty shifting to whoever kept them fed. But word came at noon that Tywin's forces had cut the roads north, ambushing a supply train from the Riverlands. Only a handful of wounded survivors made it to the gates, bearing tales of slaughter. Robb listened grimly, knowing he would have to answer Tywin's challenge soon. At council, the debate was fierce. "We must attack," roared the Greatjon, pounding his fist on the table. "We have the city, but if we wait, we'll be starved out like rats." Edmure shook his head. "A sortie would be madness. Tywin has the numbers, and we hold the walls. We must wait for the reach of the Vale." Bryndon's face was set. "And what if they never come? If Tywin cuts our lines, the city will turn on us. We need a victory, a sign that we are not trapped." Robb stood, feeling the weight of all their hopes. "We will not be goaded into open battle, but nor will we cower. Tomorrow, I will ride to the gate of the gods. I will show the city that their king does not fear the lions. We will not yield the city, nor will we abandon the realm." That night, he knelt in the God's Wood, seeking counsel in the silent face of the weirwood. Gray wind lay at his feet, eyes shining in the moonlight. Robb felt the cold seep into his bones, but it steadied him. He remembered his father, the way Ned had looked when faced with impossible choices. Honor and duty, justice and mercy. He prayed for guidance, for strength, and for the lives of those who trusted him. The next day, the gate of the gods filled with small folk and soldiers alike as Robb rode forth. His banner unfurled, gray wind at his flank. The cheers were louder this time, real, not forced. Sansa watched from the parapet, her heart pounding with hope and fear. Even Catelyn found comfort in the sight of her son, proud and unbending. Robb addressed the crowd, his voice clear. "The city is ours, and we will not be driven out. The North remembers. We have come to bring peace, not more war. I swear to you, so long as I draw breath, King's Landing will not fall to lions or traitors. We are one people now. Let no one divide us." His words echoed through the city, and for a time, even the bells of Baelor's Sept seemed to ring in accord. The city breathed easier, hope flickering like a candle in the dark. Yet, in the shadows, other hands moved. Varys slipped through the tunnels beneath the Red Keep, his little birds gathering rumors of plots, lords still loyal to Cersei, merchants bribed by Tywin, whispers that the Wolf King would not last. Littlefinger sowed discord among the court, quietly hinting to those who listened that the true power lay with coin, not steel. Catelyn counseled patience, urging Robb to trust only those whose loyalty had been proven on the field. "The city is a snake's nest," she warned. "Keep your enemies close, but not so close that you forget who you are." Edmure, always eager, urged Robb to press their advantage, to send riders to rally the Riverlands, to open talks with the Vale, to use Sansa as a marriage pawn if needed. Sansa, hearing these schemes, kept her own counsel, her thoughts drifting northward to Arya and the home she had lost. The siege wore on. Supplies dwindled. Tywin's men prowled the roads, harrying every wagon and rider. The city's nights grew restless. the old anger stirring in alley and cellar. More than once, Robb's men caught would-be assassins slipping toward the Red Keep. Each time the Northmen made a brutal example, hanging the offenders from the city gates. Still, hope held. News arrived that the Vale was mustering men. Jan Royce and the Knights of the Bloody Gate rumored to be riding south. In the Reach, Mace Tyrell wavered, but reports suggested he might turn against the Lannisters if the wolves held King's Landing. Robb worked tirelessly, meeting with the smallfolk, overseeing the repair of the city's walls, riding the perimeter with the Blackfish, sharing meals with his men to keep their spirits high. He wrote letters north, begging White Harbor and the Neck for more men and supplies. He sent envoys to Sunspear and Highgarden, pressing his claim as the true king who brought peace rather than chaos. One day, as he met with Sansa and Catelyn in the Solar, a servant arrived breathless. "Riders at the King's Gate, your grace. They bear the sigil of House Arryn." Robb hurried to the walls, heart pounding. Below, armored knights bearing the crescent moon and falcon formed a bright wedge amid the mud and rubble. At their head rode Jan Royce, bronze armor shining, eyes stern. The gates were opened, and Lord Royce rode in, flanked by his knights. He dismounted before Robb, knelt, and offered his sword. "The Vale rides for the true king. We come at the bidding of Lady Stark, for the honor of your house and ours." Relief swept through the crowd. The Northmen cheered. The River Lords wept with joy. Robb clasped Royce's arm, gratitude fierce in his chest. "Welcome, my lord. With your strength we will drive the lions from the gates." The next days passed in a frenzy of preparation. The Knights of the Vale were fresh, their armor bright, their morale unbroken. The city felt new strength, hope surging once more. Tywin, hearing of the reinforcements, sent envoys again, this time offering parley, hinting at truce. Robb met the envoys in the throne room, Royce and the Blackfish at his side, Sansa and Catelyn watching from above. "Tell Tywin Lannister," Robb said, "that if he lays down his arms and marches west, he may keep Casterly Rock and his gold. If not, we will break his army and his line will end here." The envoys bowed and withdrew, but everyone knew Tywin would not yield. The final battle loomed, the air crackling with the promise of thunder. The Knights of the Vale took their places on the walls. The River Lords readied the gates. The Northmen sharpened their axes. And Robb Stark, Wolf King, stood beneath the rain-washed sky and set his gaze upon the future. The city waited, breathless, as the drums of war began again, and the fate of the realm balanced on the edge of a blade. The city of King's Landing thrummed with a nervous energy in the days after the Vale's banners rose above the walls. Spring had finally pressed its way into the city, warm and sweet in the courtyards. But beneath the sunlight the air was thick with dread and hope. Masons repaired shattered battlements, the clatter of hammers echoing against the hills. Fishmongers hawked their catch along the muddy quays, while across every tavern and market stall people whispered of war's end and what would follow. In the high halls of the Red Keep, Robb Stark gathered his council as the noon bells chimed, their voices muffled by the velvet tapestries hung to warm the chilly corridors. Sir Brynden Blackfish, Lord Jon Royce, Edmure Tully, and the Great Jon formed the core of Robb's circle. Sansa sat with her mother, quill scratching across a parchment as she copied out lists of grain and fish, keeping the city's ledgers balanced. There was no rest for the Wolf King, not with Tywin Lannister waiting at the city's throat. "The lions have not moved," Brynden reported. Gray hair wild above sharp blue eyes. "Their camp grows, but they do not test our walls. Scouts from the west tell of new levies marching under Lannister banners. Brown, Crakehall, Lefford, the dregs of every holdfast between the Trident and Casterly Rock. But Tywin is cautious. He wants us to bleed first. He wants us to bleed first." Robb pressed his fingers together, chin resting on steepled hands. "If Tywin thought us weak, he'd attack. He waits for us to break. We won't give him the pleasure." Lord Royce grunted approval, his voice like rolling stones. "The Vale stands with you, your grace. Our knights are fresh, our horses rested. If we sally, we can sweep Tywin's foragers from the fields, Buy time, win hearts. Men see. Edmure, still lean from his months as a Lannister captive, shook his head. Every man outside the walls is one less to hold them when Tywin tries his strength. We are the rock now. Let him break himself upon us. The great John's laughter filled the chamber. Let the lions starve. Winter's coming for them too. But Catelyn's voice cut through the braggadocio. The city starves as well. Sansa and I have stretched the granaries as far as we can, but by next moon, even Dorne's bounty will run dry. We need more than ships, more than walls. We need peace. The room stilled at that. Peace was the word no one dared speak too loudly, lest it shatter on their tongues. Robb looked from his mother to his bannermen, weighing every hope and fear in his heart. If Tywin will not break us with sword or siege, he said at last, he may try poison or gold or treachery. No gates are closed to a man with a fat purse. We must root out the Lannister loyalists before they open our city from within. Brynden nodded, grim. My men search every cellar, every scribe's den, every merchant's house. We have broken 3 conspiracies since the Vale's arrival. There will be more. Lord Royce scowled. I do not like the taste of southern plots. Give me a battle line, not a snake pit. Sansa's eyes never left the parchment. The people are hungry and frightened. They pray for an end. If you can win their trust, they will keep the gates closed and watch for any who would betray you. Let them see your justice, swift but fair. Robb nodded, the weight of her words settling over him like a cloak. We will show them justice. Let it be known, any who plot with the Lannisters against the peace of this city will face the king's justice. By my hand, or by those I trust. But those who serve the people, who help the hungry, will be rewarded. Nan? So justice became the watchword of the week. Robb himself presided over the hearing of cases in the Great Hall, Catelyn and Sansa seated to his right, Brynden and Royce flanking the throne. Petitions streamed in, complaints of gold cloaks robbing the bakers, of grain hoarders cheating the poor, of Lannister spies offering silver for sabotage. Robb listened to each in turn, his patience worn raw but never snapped. He meted out punishment where it was due. Floggings, exile, a handful of hangings for the worst offenders. He rewarded those who brought good tidings. A boy who exposed a gold cloak's treason received a cloak of wolfskin and a seat at Sansa's table. The people saw, and they began to whisper of the just Wolf King. Not all the city loved him. There were hard eyes in the shadows, and in the wine-sour alleys, men still cursed the North. But the cries of King in the North rang louder in the streets, and the city's temper cooled. Meanwhile, the Lannister camp stirred. Reports came daily, Tywin's men foraging farther and farther afield, burning villages that refused him tribute, pressing small folk into his lines. Spies, said the gold flowed as water, buying the loyalty of hedge knights and broken men. In return, Robb's own riders slipped from the gates nightly, harrying foragers, ambushing supply wagons, sowing chaos on the western roads. It was not enough to turn the tide. Tywin's patience was a weapon as sharp as any blade. On the 7th day of the Vale's arrival, a horn sounded from the western fields. A Lannister envoy, escorted by white-cloaked knights, approached the Gate of the Gods. Robb stood atop the battlements as the party drew close, his cloak snapping in the brisk wind, Grey Wind's low growl trembling beneath his hand. The envoy was Sir Kevan Lannister, his uncle, silver-haired, grave, armored in gold and crimson. He dismounted beneath the gate, bowing with chilly formality. "My lord nephew," Kevan said. "Lord Tywin offers parley. He wishes to meet with you and your council beneath the banner of truce, to discuss terms and spare the city further blood." Robb regarded him, unreadable. "My uncle is welcome in the city. He may enter with no more than 3 men, unarmed. Or I will meet him in the field, under the eyes of both armies, with my own council present." Kevan considered, then bowed again. "We accept your terms. At noon tomorrow, beneath the walls." Bah. The parley became the talk of the city. nerves drawn to the breaking point. That night, Catelyn pleaded with Robb to show caution. Tywin is no man's fool. Do not trust to honor alone. Bring the Blackfish, Royce, and the Greatjon. Show strength. Robb nodded. And you, mother? Sansa. We will pray. That is all we can do. At noon the gates opened. Robb rode out in his armor of gray and white, the direwolf helm masking his face, ice strapped across his back. At his side rode Brynden, Royce, the Greatjon, and a score of chosen men. Grey wind loped at his stirrup. Hackles raised. On the field, Tywin waited, immaculate as ever, hair a silver mane, his lion cloak thrown over burnished plate. With him stood Kevan, Adam Marbrand, and a silent, watchful Maester Pycelle. The two parties faced one another beneath a white banner. Between them lay only trampled grass and the wary eyes of their bannerman. Tywin inclined his head. Robb Stark, King of the North, so you style yourself. I come to end this war. Robb's eyes did not blink. End it, or win it. Ain't smile. Sometimes the two are the same. Robb did not smile. Speak your terms. Tywin's voice rang clear. Surrender the city. Release my son and my family. Return the Riverlands to their lords. In exchange, I will grant you the North, unmolested, and the right to rule it as you wish. The war ends. Blood need not flow in the streets. The Greatjon snorted, but Robb silenced him with a look. You offered the North what was always ours. And for that, you would reclaim all you have lost? Tywin's face hardened. The Iron Throne belongs to the crown. Your presence here is rebellion, and rebellion breeds only death. Mendar Sawol. Lord Royce's hand drifted to his sword, but Tywin's gaze slid past him, settling on Robb. Refuse, and I will burn every field from the Trident to Dorne. Your people will starve. Your sister and mother will hang from the walls. The choice is yours. Silence. A gull circled overhead, its cry sharp in the tense air. Robb met Tywin's stare without flinching. You threaten me with fire and starvation, but your own lines are stretched. The reach wavers. The Vale rides with me. Dorne supplies us. I hold King's Landing, and with it, the heart of the realm. If you force battle, there will be no kingdom left to rule. But I am no tyrant. Here are my terms. Withdraw your army. Recognize the North and the Riverlands as free kingdoms. Swear never to bear arms against us again. And you may have your kin, Joffrey, Cersei, and your bannermen, alive and unharmed. Break your word, and your line ends here. Damn? Tywin's eyes narrowed, the mask slipping to reveal something fierce beneath. You presume much, boy. Robb's voice was iron. I presume only what I have won. A long moment, the wind whipping their cloaks. At last, Tywin inclined his head. I will consider your terms. You have until tomorrow at sunrise. Refuse, and there will be no mercy. With that, he wheeled his horse and rode away, banners streaming behind. Robb returned to the city, his council gathering as soon as he crossed the gate. He will not yield, Brynden warned. Tywin Lannister is not a man who sues for peace. He may be forced, Royce replied. If the Vale rides out at dawn, if Dorne lands men, he will be pinched between anvil and hammer. The Greatjon grinned. Let him break himself against our walls. I hunger for lion's meat. Robb sent word to every ally, calling for readiness. The city hummed with expectation, the walls thick with archers, the gates shored up with iron and oak. In the streets, Sansa led the orphans to the sept for prayers, while Catelyn walked among the wounded blessing each one. That night, Robb found sleep at last, only to dream of direwolves and red fields, of a crown made of ice and swords. Dawn broke silver on the horizon. The city stood quiet. Then the horn sounded from the Lannister lines, a signal, not for parley, but for battle. The first arrows hissed from the fields. Ziga towers, built in secret, rumbled forward, their iron-capped rams battering the gate of the gods. Fires bloomed where pots of burning pitch were hurled over the walls. Lannister infantry, armored and silent, pressed in tight formations, their red cloaks bright as blood. Robb donned his armor, heart hammering, and rode to the walls. The Blackfish commanded the archers, volleys raining down on the attackers. Royce led the Vale Knights in a furious sortie, crashing into Lannister flanks, cutting down men by the score. The Greyjohn, bellowing like a madman, led his Northmen to the breach, axes flashing. Grey wind leapt from rampart to rampart, sowing terror among the assailants. Robb stood where the fighting was thickest, his sword red, his cloak torn. The city's bells rang, a cacophony of fear and fury. The battle lasted all day, the air thick with smoke and screams. Tywin himself led the assault, his golden armor gleaming in the haze, cutting down every man who faltered. But the city held. The defenders pushed back every assault, the walls running slick with blood but never breached. By sunset, the fields before the city were strewn with bodies, Lannister banners torn and trampled. Tywin's forces fell back at last, their camp ablaze where Vale riders had circled and struck. Robb stood atop the gatehouse, breathing smoke and sweat, the crown heavy on his brow. The city erupted in wild cheers. For one night at least, the Wolf King's hold on King's Landing was unbreakable. In the Red Keep, Catelyn wept in relief as Sansa washed the wounds of the fallen. Bryndon's men patrolled the walls, wary of another assault. The Greyjohn celebrated with his men in the square, drinking deep from casks seized from the city's cellars. Robb returned to the solar at dusk, blood dried to brown on his cheek. Grey wind pressed close at his side. He found his mother and sister waiting, Catelyn's eyes shining with pride and exhaustion, Sansa's hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to his forehead. "You did it, Robb," Sansa whispered, voice thick with awe and fear. "For today," he replied, his smile wan and weary. "For today, we are free." He sat beside the hearth, the fire burning low, and listened to the city's song, a rough, desperate sound, but hopeful. Yet as he drifted into a troubled sleep, Robb Stark knew the war was far from over. Tywin Lannister did not forgive, nor forget. Allies would shift, gold would change hands, old feuds would flare. The Iron Throne loomed above all, its shadow long and deadly. But in the battered heart of King's Landing, for one night at least, the Wolf's banner flew above the city, and Robb Stark dreamed of peace. End. Night wrapped King's Landing in a shroud of weary celebration. The bells still echoed, not with the peals of mourning or warning, but with ragged joy. The city had withstood Tywin Lannister's onslaught and held its breath, bruised and battered, but not broken. Lanterns flickered from every window, and the streets, though still slick with the blood of battle, were alive with the cautious laughter of people daring to believe that morning might come. In the great hall, beneath the cold shadow of the Iron Throne, Robb Stark walked the length of the carpet, his steps echoing. His armor bore the marks of combat, not yet cleaned of blood or smoke. Grey wind trailed at his heels, muzzle dark with the scent of war. Behind him followed the Greyjohn, his face split in a wild grin, and Lord Jon Royce, who bore himself with the silent confidence of a man who'd seen victory, and knew its price. Catelyn stood near the foot of the dais, her face composed, but her eyes bright with unshed tears. Sansa waited at her side, cheeks flushed from tending wounded all day, her hands still flecked with the stubborn brown of dried blood. Even Bryndon Blackfish, usually dour, seemed lighter, his tired eyes fixed with a rare pride on his nephew. Robb paused beneath the Iron Throne, looking up at the twisted steel. The throne seemed to glare back, cold and uncaring. He spoke at last, voice hoarse but strong. "This victory is not mine alone," he said, turning to the gathering of lords and bannermen. "The city stands because you stood. You held when others might have faltered. My father taught me that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. I say now, the king who wears the crown must bear its weight, but he cannot do it alone." "Ben?" The Greyjohn stepped forward, slapping his mailed fist to his chest. "You speak true, your grace. Northmen, riverlords, men of the Vale. We are one pack, and the lions will remember it." His words echoed from the stones and were met with a roar of approval. Catelyn's eyes met Robb's, pride and worry mingling. He understood the unspoken warning. Today's triumph could become tomorrow's curse. Already, the city's mood was shifting. With the danger at their walls receding, old fears and rivalries might bloom once more. Littlefinger had been seen whispering in the galleries. The High Septon's couriers scurried to and from the Sept of Baelor. In Fleabottom, gold cloaks still bullied the weak, and Lannister partisans hid in cellar and alley. That night, Robb called council, summoning his lords and advisors. The torchlight flickered on grave faces. Edmure Tully, shaken but proud. Jon Royce, sturdy as ever. Brynden, flint-eyed. The great Juan, still exultant. And Catelyn, her voice low and calm. "We've bloodied Tywin, but the lion is not slain," Brynden said, fingers tapping the hilt of his sword. "Hell lick his wounds, buy more swords and strike again." "We must strike first. We're short on men and food," Edmure cautioned. "The city's hungry still, and even with Dorne's help, it's only a matter of time before unrest grows." "The Reach must choose," Royce said. "If Mace Tyrell rides with us, Tywin will not dare another assault. If he does not, the Wolves and the Falcons may be hard-pressed to hold the city for long." Robb listened, weighing every word. "I will send riders to Highgarden and Sunspear. We must turn promise into alliance. If need be, I'll ride myself." Catelyn frowned. "You are needed here. The city sees your face and finds hope. If you go, who will stand in your stead?" He hesitated, feeling the invisible weight of the crown pressing at his brow. "If I do not move, Tywin will. We cannot afford to wait on the mercy of our enemies." "Then send the Blackfish," she said. "Or Lord Royce. Let them carry your words and your honor. You must hold King's Landing, Robb. You must be seen to rule." So it was decided. Brynden would ride for Highgarden, Royce for Sunspear. The Greyjohn would command sorties beyond the walls, harrying Tywin's wounded host, driving them farther west. Robb turned to Sansa. "Your kindness to the people has not gone unnoticed. I would have you continue. See that the orphans are cared for, the septs provisioned, and the market squares kept free from Goldcloak corruption." She bowed her head, eyes shining. "Yes, Your Grace." That night, Robb found no sleep. The Red Keep was too quiet, every creak and footfall amplified by his fears. He paced the Godswood, Grey Wind beside him, seeking comfort in the face of the weirwood. He wondered what his father would have done if he would have found some way to balance steel and mercy. In his dreams, the city burned. Dragonfire on the horizon, a shadow with a golden mane looming over the walls. He woke with a start to the distant peal of a bell. Dawn broke red as a wound. The markets buzzed, and the city's wounds began to heal, if only superficially. Grain shipments from Dorne were distributed under guard. Sansa and Catelyn met with guildsmen and septas, negotiating more fair-handed distribution. In the streets, the people watched the direwolf banners with wary hope. 2 days later, Brynden returned, his face grave. Highgarden would not commit. Not yet. Tyrell will not strike unless he sees which way the wind blows. He wants an ironclad promise. Marriage, lands, assurances that his own interests will be served when the war is done. Robb's jaw tightened. The time for hedging is past. The realm is burning. Does he wish to rule ashes? Royce, arriving soon after from Sunspear, bore better news. Dorne's ships would continue to supply the city, but Prince Doran would not send soldiers without greater promises. He asks for the safety of Myrcella Baratheon and a say in the realm's future. That evening, a new threat surfaced. The Blackfish brought a Lannister agent before Robb. A merchant's son caught smuggling letters from Tywin to certain goldcloaks and merchants within the city, promising them lands and riches in exchange for opening the gates when next the lions returned. Robb had the boy questioned, his co-conspirators rooted out and thrown in the dungeons. He called a gathering in the Great Hall, the prisoner forced to kneel before all. "Let this stand as warning," Robb said. "We will have no more Lannister treachery in this city. Mercy for the penitent, justice for the faithless." The boy was exiled, his property forfeit to the crown. His fellow plotters were stripped of titles and wealth. The message was clear. King's Landing would not return to the old ways of gold and betrayal. Still, the city's nerves frayed. Rumors swirled that Tywin had hired foreign sellswords, that dragons had been sighted across the narrow sea, that the Red Priests foretold the fall of all kings. Each night, the bells rang out for some new alarm. A fire in the quays, an assassination attempt on a northern officer, a riot in Flea Bottom. Robb's men responded with discipline, never cruelty, but the threat was ever present. Robb sought advice from Catelyn, who counseled patience, and from Sansa, who watched the mood of the people as keenly as any spymaster. They are tired of war. She told him one evening in the solar. Her voice quiet and certain. Feed them, protect them, and they will be yours. Fail them, and even the wolves will find no welcome here. He nodded, knowing she spoke truth. He redoubled his efforts, sending riders north to Winterfell, east to White Harbor, seeking every scrap of support, every ally not yet pledged. He spoke often with Varys, who brought tidings from the docks and the back rooms. His soft words threaded with warnings of unrest and secret plots. It was the 7th night after the battle when word came from the west. 1,000 Lannister riders had slipped through the city's outlying defenses, raiding granaries and burning farmsteads, cutting off the last easy road to the Riverlands. Tywin had not given up, only shifted his aim. The next morning, Robb called his council to the ramparts. We must break the siege, not wait to be bled. The Vale's knights are fresh, our Northmen are strong, and Tywin's men are wounded. We strike at dusk, catch them as they regroup, and drive them from the fields. The Greyjohn bellowed in delight, and even Edmure smiled. It is time the lion learned to fear the wolf, the Blackfish growled. At sunset, the gates opened, and the combined might of the North Riverlands and Vale surged from the city. Robb rode at the head, Grey Wind bounding ahead, the banners of the wolf, trout, and falcon snapping in the wind. The men rode silent, hearts thundering, the memory of blood and fire driving them forward. They struck at the Lannister camp as the sun dipped below the horizon. A swift and terrible onslaught. Knights of the Vale crashed into Tywin's flank, lances shattering against gold and crimson shields. Northmen and Riverlords stormed the barricades, axes and swords gleaming. The fighting was desperate, but Robb pressed forward, refusing to yield. Grey Wind tore through lines of enemy men, sowing panic. Robb fought beside his banner, ice in hand, every blow a cry for the north. Lord Royce shattered the line of Lannister cavalry, the Greyjohn's laughter rolling over the field like thunder. For hours, the battle raged beneath a sky of burning stars. The Lannisters fought like cornered beasts, but they were exhausted, their lines stretched thin. At midnight, Tywin sounded the retreat, his army slipping away into the darkness, broken and battered. Robb stood in the midst of the field as dawn broke, breathless, bloodied, victorious. The fields beyond King's Landing were strewn with the dead and dying, the banners of the wolf and the falcon standing tall. The city, for the first time in living memory, was safe from siege. The victors returned to a city in uproar. Cheers ringing from every street, people pouring from their houses to hail their king. Robb rode through the crowd, Sansa at his side, Catelyn waving from the walls. Flowers and ribbons flew through the air. The bells rang not for warning or mourning, but for triumph. In the great hall, Robb knelt before the weirwood sapling transplanted from the north, Grey Wind beside him, and gave thanks for victory and the hope of peace. His council gathered, bruised but proud, each bearing new scars. Today we have won the city, Robb said. Tomorrow, we win the realm. But we must not become what we have fought against. Justice, mercy, and honor will rule King's Landing, and the North remembers. Sansa smiled at his side, her hand in her mother's, and for a fleeting moment, the wounds of war seemed to fade beneath the promise of a new dawn. Outside, the city's bells pealed once more, their music carrying over blood-stained stones and broken walls. A song not of conquest, but of survival, hope, and the wolf's unyielding heart. Ah, hey. Kain. The days after the breaking of Tywin's siege passed in a strange golden peace, the sort that made the city almost unrecognizable to those who'd survived its torments. King's Landing, usually restless and stinking, felt as if it were holding its breath between storms. The clamor of smiths at their forges was for rebuilding, not war. The bells rang for weddings, not funerals. Women swept the streets with quiet pride, and the children, so long weary and hollow-eyed, dared to chase one another in games across the cobbles, painting direwolves and falcons in chalk on every wall. Yet Robb Stark knew well that peace was never more fragile than when it seemed assured. The wounds of war lingered. The stench of burned flesh still haunted the lower city. The walls, though repaired, showed black scars where wildfire and siege ladders had once threatened. From every gatehouse and market square, carved wolf's heads watched the city with eyes of painted onyx and iron. A warning to any who remembered lion banners. Robb rose early each morning, walking the ramparts with the Blackfish, checking the gates, trading words with his men. There was satisfaction in these small rituals. The city's garrison had grown disciplined under his hand, the Riverlords and Vale Knights drilling beside Northmen until their rivalry became camaraderie. The city's sentries greeted Robb with respect now, though in their eyes he could still read hunger and wariness. Too many southern men feared the Wolf King's justice, and not without cause. On the fourth day, word arrived from the west. Tywin's host had retreated toward Lannisport, burning fields as they went, collecting what broken men they could. The roads between King's Landing and the Riverlands were open at last, and already Edmure's outriders brought stragglers and refugees into the city. Most were small folk, gaunt from hunger, hands calloused from farm and sword alike. Robb ordered bread and water for all. His crown, a simple circlet of dark northern silver, drew more reverence than the Iron Throne itself. Catelyn pressed him to use this moment for peace. Send terms west. Offer Tywin parole for his family. Joffrey, Cersei, the rest. Promise him the security of his house and lands. The realm is sick of war. Robb considered her words as he walked the gardens above the city with Sansa and the Blackfish. The air was heavy with lilac and lemon. Sansa spoke softly, her hand resting on Robb's arm. If you show mercy, the small folk will remember. They are tired of kings who make corpses and orphans. Then, he touched her hand, grateful for her calm. I will not be another Aerys or Joffrey. The realm must heal, but Tywin will not accept mercy from a wolf. Bryndon's voice was cold. Let him refuse then, but let the realm see you offered peace. So, Robb sent a messenger, bearing sealed terms. The safe return of all Lannister kin, in exchange for peace and the recognition of the North and Riverlands as free. He added a token of honor, gold from the royal coffers, enough to feed a city, if not an army. He gave the man a horse and a wolfskin cloak, and sent him west. In the days that followed, Robb turned to ruling. He sat in the great hall, the Iron Throne looming behind him, its chill and jagged spines a silent threat. He wore his own crown and seated himself on a simple chair of carved oak. Each petitioner was heard. Bakers, smiths, mothers, searching for lost sons. He judged disputes with the measured fairness that his father had taught, and the city came to trust him, if not love him. At council, the old rivals lingered. The Great John pressed for more spoils and lands for the Northmen. Lord Royce argued for the rights of the Vale, demanding a voice for Lady Arryn. Edmure Tully tried to balance old debts and new hopes. But the Riverlords were restless, eager to return to their fields and rebuild their burned villages. Sansa, meanwhile, had become the city's darling. She walked the markets daily, protected by a guard of northern spears, tending orphans and soothing fears. The small folk called her the Wolf Maid and left flowers on the steps of the Red Keep in her honor. Even the High Septon invited her to prayer at Beller's Sept, his sermons heavy with praise for mercy and justice. One bright morning, a ship arrived from White Harbor, bearing letters from Lord Wyman Manderley. He pledged ships and grain to the king, swearing fealty for the North and offering his grandson as a ward to bind their loyalty. That same day, news came from the Neck. House Reed had secured the crossings. Marshes flooded to slow any Southron host, and the banners of Howland Reed hung from Moat Caelan's battered towers. Robb stood in the map room with Caitlin and the Blackfish, candles burning low. "The North is united," Brynden said, satisfaction in his tone. "The Riverlands are secured. The Vale is loyal. If we hold the city, the realm will follow." Caitlin hesitated. "There are whispers from the east. Daenerys Targaryen gathers ships and sells words in Pentos. The Iron Islands are restless. We must not grow complacent." "Nan. I will send embassies to the east," Robb promised. "If Daenerys means to return, let her come as friend, not foe." 2 days later, Tywin's reply arrived. The messenger was bloodied, but alive. He brought a scroll sealed with a lion's head in red wax. Robb read it in silence. Tywin refused the peace. He would not recognize Robb's crown, nor surrender his claim to King's Landing. He demanded the return of his kin, threatened vengeance, and promised the realm would bleed for every day the wolf sat on the Iron Throne. Caitlin sighed as Robb burned the letter. So be it. The choice was his. The same day, word reached the city that Stannis Baratheon had landed men on the Stormlands coast, burning Lannister ships and banners wherever he found them. The realm was fracturing, old wounds reopening as new claimants staked their future on steel and fire. Robb summoned his council. "We hold King's Landing," he declared, "but we cannot fight on every front. Our people come first. Grain, water, peace. If Stannis marches, we will parley. If Daenerys returns, we will treat. But we will not abandon the city." The Blackfish nodded. "The city is strong for now. Let the lions and dragons tear at each other. We will be the stone upon which the tide breaks." Sansa spoke that night to Robb in the gardens. "You must think of the future, not only the next battle. The city will need healing. Houses united. Children born, not buried. Let your hand be firm but gentle." He took her words to heart. He began to plan for a festival, something to unite the city and show that the Wolf King's reign would bring more than war. Banners were hung from the towers. Musicians called from every quarter. For 3 days, the city feasted on the bounty from the north and Dorne. There were tourneys for the knights, archery for the small folk, music and laughter in every square. Sansa presided over a gathering of orphan children, gifting them small wolves carved from wood and bread. In these days, even the lords forgot their feuds. Edmure drank with Royce, the Greyjoy danced with a southern maid, and Brynden sat smiling, wine in hand, as musicians from the Riverlands played his favorite tune. It could not last. On the 4th night, as the city slept, a band of Sellswords loyal to Littlefinger tried to scale the walls, gold promised to any who could throw open the king's gate to Tywin's spies. Robb's sentries caught them before they could strike, but 2 guards died in the struggle. Littlefinger was summoned, his protestations smooth as always, but the gold found in his rooms damned him. Robb confronted him in the tower. "You have played both sides for too long, Pettier. You will be confined until your trial, and if you are found guilty, you will die." Littlefinger only smiled, eyes cold and clever. "Kings rise and fall, your grace. Cities burn. I serve the realm, always." He was taken away in chains, his schemes ended for now. The morning after, Robb gathered his council in the Solar. "We are surrounded by threats, but we are united. We must send envoys to Stannis and to the Iron Islands. We must make peace with Dorne and watch the east. The north will not yield the city. The Riverlands will stand. If we are to survive, we must build, not just defend." His words inspired. Over the coming weeks, the city's wounds were tended. New granaries were built, the streets patrolled with Northern and Vale men in equal measure. Justice was fair, but never cruel. When a baker cheated his customers, he was put to work baking bread for the orphans, not sent to the dungeons. When a sellsword threatened a child, he was exiled, not hanged. The city began to change. The walls were whitewashed, the gutters cleaned, the gardens restored. Music returned to the squares. Weddings were celebrated in the Sept and at the Heart Tree in the Godswood. The banners of the Dire Wolf flew over every gate. But the hearts of the people began to open, not from fear, but from hope. One evening, Robb stood atop the walls, the sun setting blood red beyond the black water. Caitlin joined him, her arm around his shoulders. "You have done well, my son. The city is yours, not only by conquest, but by right. Remember always that a king's strength is measured in peace, not war." "Ben Dawa." He nodded, feeling the truth of it deep in his bones. But he did not rest. Messages still came. Warnings of ships sailing from the east, of lords in the west gathering strength, of the faith growing bolder, their sermons hinting at rebellion. Robb prepared, but he no longer feared. The city was strong. The north remembered. The pack endured. When at last, Sansa came to him with news that Arya had been seen in the Riverlands, wild, free, and riding with a band of outlaws. Robb's laughter echoed from the towers. He sent riders with all haste, eager to find his little sister and bring her home. In the months that followed, the realm would tremble. Old houses would rise and fall. Dragons would cross the sea, and the wolves of the north would face new perils. But King's Landing would remain, a city reborn from blood and fire, held not by fear, but by the promise that even in the darkest night, the dawn will come. And above it all, the direwolf banner snapped in the wind, a symbol not of conquest, but of a family's love, a people's hope, and a king's unbreakable will. Ika. Summer heat pressed down on King's Landing like a great invisible hand. The city, so recently battered by war and siege, now shimmered in the haze, its towers gleaming over the wide green plain that ran east to the Blackwater. At the river, children splashed and shrieked. Higher up, noble women carried parasols through the palace gardens. But beneath the seeming calm, the city was as restless as ever, watchful, alert, half expecting the next wave to break over its ancient stones. Robb Stark woke each morning to the sound of bells and gulls. He slept little and not deeply. The city's cries and the shifting of gray wind's great body at the foot of his bed seemed to fill the quiet hours. On the worst nights, he walked the Red Keep alone, passing through shadowed halls where Lannister tapestries had been stripped from the walls and replaced with the stark white-on-gray of House Stark. In the God's Wood, he knelt by the heart tree, praying to the old gods for wisdom he did not always feel. On one such morning, Robb left the keep before sunrise, the city still draped in cool blue. The Blackfish waited at the gatehouse, already speaking with the night captain. Brynden Tully's face was worn, his hair gone nearly white, but there was a gleam of satisfaction in his eye. 2 more grain barges arrived from White Harbor before dawn, he said as Robb approached. Lord Manderley keeps his word. We have enough stores now to see the city through to next winter, barring disaster or treachery. Benesimtand. Good, Robb replied. He looked east to the faint mist where the river curved away. Any trouble on the roads? Some bandits, a handful of Lannister loyalists sniffing about. Nothing we can't handle. Brynden lowered his voice. But the Goldcloaks caught a septon last night, preaching sedition in the cellars of the Dragon Pit. He had 50 men ready to riot, all crying for a true king and the Seven's justice. Robb grimaced. Bring him to the hall. We'll see if he preaches so boldly when the city's eyes are on him. Later, as the city awoke, Robb held court. The throne room was filled with the scents of candle smoke and new-cut flowers, an offering from Sansa's gardens. Caitlin sat by his side, Sansa on the other, her composure grown and steady. The septon was brought in, flanked by gold cloaks and city guards. He was gaunt and wild-eyed, his robe stained and his words sharp as daggers. You think you are king, northern boy? He spat, looking not at Robb but at the faces behind him. The gods are not mocked. You sit in the seat of dragons, you spurn the Seven. This city will bleed for your hubris. Robb listened. The city has bled enough, he answered at last. There will be no more riots, no more blood spilled for the pride of kings or priests. Take him to the dungeons, but see that he is fed. If he chooses peace, he may yet serve the city. Some in the hall murmured approval. Others grumbled, wishing for harsher punishment. Caitlin gave Robb a look, approval tempered with caution. Afterward, Sansa brought news from the city. The small folk were restless, she said, but there was hope. They trust you. She insisted. Though they watch and wait. The orphans have enough to eat. And mothers fear the gold cloaks less than they did. But the faith is bold. The High Septon calls you usurper. And some lords whisper that you should wed. Robb met her eyes, surprised by the steel in her words. Who do they suggest? Some say a Tyrell. Some a princess from the east. Others. Her voice softened. Some say you should take a wife from the city itself. Make peace by making family. He smiled despite the heaviness in his chest. I will not be hurried by southern whispers. When I wed, it will be for more than politics. Sansa looked at him with an old sadness, and Robb knew she thought of her own broken betrothals. The day grew hot, the city bustling with traders from the Reach, Dornish envoys in silks, the occasional hard-eyed knight from the Riverlands. The Great John arrived at midday, red-faced and cheerful, boasting of a half-dozen Lannister spies hung from the walls. Edmure Tully rode in with a new retinue of river knights, reports of trouble on the Trident, but nothing yet serious. In the council chamber, Robb reviewed messages from the north. Moat Cailin was secure, the Boltons still silent. Roos's men uneasy, their loyalties ever in question. White Harbor sent steady ships. In the east, Daenerys Targaryen's fleet was gathering, but reports were uncertain. Some claimed she sailed for Slaver's Bay, others that she looked west toward Westeros. That afternoon, envoys from Sunspear and the Arbor arrived together, requesting audience. Doran Martell's letter was cautious, promising continued grain and ships in exchange for Myrcella Baratheon's safety, and a voice in the city's council. Paxter Redwine, bold and smooth, offered wine and a secret promise. Highgarden would consider marriage, if Robb's hand was still free. When Robb brought these offers to council, the Great John bellowed for Tyrell gold, while Lord Royce urged caution with the Martells. Brynden shook his head at all of it. Take nothing at face value. The Tyrells will side with the strongest. So will the Martells, in their way. Keep them close but never trust too deeply. Caitlin agreed, but Sansa argued for openness. Invite them to a feast, she said. Let them see the city healed, not just battered. If they eat our bread and share our fire, it will be harder to betray us. So Robb sent out invitations to lords and merchants alike. In the week that followed, King's Landing sparkled for the first time since the Wolf King's banners were raised. Lanterns hung from every archway, musicians from the Riverlands, and Dorne filled the squares. The Godswood blazed with flowers and candles. The feast was held in the Great Hall, banners of wolf, trout, and falcon woven with the sun and rose. Paxter Redwine toasted the king, his words smooth as oil. May King Robb's reign be long, his children many, and his friends ever loyal. Doran Martell's envoy spoke of peace, the slow blade that wins the day. Merchants from the city cheered, and the small folk watched from open doors. Sansa presided over the children's table, the orphans at her side. The Blackfish told tales of the Trident, and Edmure led a song for the fallen. For a moment, the city was united, not by war, but by hope. Yet Robb saw the currents beneath. Paxter's eyes never left the high table, watching for weakness. The Dornishman smiled, but his laughter held a question. The lords of the city drank deep, but their loyalties were shallow as puddles. Varys drifted from group to group, all soft words and softer footsteps. That night, Robb walked the walls alone, gray wind silent at his side. Below, the city flickered with torchlight, laughter rising from every quarter. But beyond the walls, the world remained uncertain. Ravens brought news of battles in the Riverlands, broken men raiding for gold, the Ironborn stirring on the western coasts. Tywin's agents still moved in shadow, promising gold and vengeance to any with a grudge. He met Brynden at the East Gate, the old knight watching the horizon. You see it, don't you, Robb? This peace, it cannot hold. Robb nodded, jaw tight. No, Dot. but I will make it last as long as I can. Da. The next morning brought news from the Trident. A band of outlaws, led by a girl calling herself Aerie, had raided a Lannister supply train. Robb's heart leapt at the name. He ordered men sent north, hoping it was Arya and not just another tale. Catelyn urged caution. The realm is too vast, and our enemies too many. Send trusted men, but do not leave the city. The days lengthened. With every sunrise, Robb felt the burdens of rule. Justice for the hungry and broken, judgment for traitors, wisdom for those who plotted or doubted. He refused to answer the High Septon's summons to the Sept of Baelor, choosing instead to hold open court in the Godswood, where the Heart Tree's face watched all who entered. Slowly, the city changed. Crime fell as Northern and Vale men patrolled together. Food reached even the poorest alleys. Catelyn oversaw the rebuilding of the Septs. Sansa reopened the city's schools. At night, songs of the North drifted through the streets. Strange at first, but soon beloved. Yet, threats gathered. Word came that Euron Greyjoy had seized the shields off the Reach coast, that Lannister Gold was buying swords in the east, that Stannis had called his banners and marched from Dragonstone. Every raven brought a new threat, a new demand. Still, the Wolf King did not flinch. He called his council, shared every letter with his lords, and ruled with an even hand. When the High Septon publicly denounced him for worshipping old gods in a city of the Seven, Robb replied with a feast for the poor at the Heart Tree, inviting all faiths, all colors, all kinds. And then, at last, word arrived that Arya Stark, alive and wild, had been spotted riding with the Brotherhood without banners near Maidenpool. Sansa wept for joy, and Catelyn's hope burned bright. Robb sent riders, offering golden pardon for any who brought Arya safely to King's Landing. It was during this hopeful unrest that the Ironborn struck. A fleet of longships, black sails against the blue, descended on the harbor at dusk, burning merchantmen and landing reavers on the wharves. For the first time in many months, the city trembled, and fire rose from the docks. Robb led the defense himself, Grey Wind by his side, the Blackfish marshalling men along the waterfront. Northmen and river lords poured down the streets, clashing with ironclad reavers in the fog. The fighting was fierce, torchlight on water, the scream of steel and the howl of wolves. By dawn, the Ironborn were driven back, their ships sinking in the bay, the last of their raiders slain or fleeing. The city awoke to ruins, but also to pride. Robb's courage was the talk of every street. Sansa and Catelyn tended the wounded. Brynden directed the repair of the harbor, and Lord Royce set his knights to patrol the coast. King's Landing, for the first time in a generation, felt itself unbreakable. The wolf banners flew not as conquerors, but as protectors. In the days that followed, messengers from the Riverlands, the Reach and Dorne arrived, offering tribute and alliance. The small folk cheered Robb's name in the streets. In the Sept and in the Godswood, prayers were offered for the king's health and the city's peace. Robb stood atop the gatehouse, looking east toward the sea. The winds had shifted, the world remade. The city he had taken by steel, he had now won by justice and hope. Behind him, the banners of House Stark fluttered in the morning breeze, a promise not only of strength, but of a home remade, and a kingdom forged anew in the heart of fire and blood.